And it's funny because like it's obviously different, but like, you know, for in our country specifically, because Disprove isn't from our country, surprise. Over here,
Why
like,
don't tell me?
Why didn't you tell me?
over here, like specifically like black people in America specifically, they all vote Democrat because that's what they were taught. And it's like generational where like literally I know people, like people in my family only vote Democrat because that's what you're supposed to do. And now we have people like, you know, Gothics is a big one that's talked about it, and Rip has obviously talked about it a lot and stuff, where they started realizing they're like, wait, why do I only vote Democrat? And they started looking at Democratic policies and they go, oh my God, this is terrible. Like, this is like the opposite of what I wanted. And then they got red pilled, but then what's the response? Oh, you're racist. And they're like, how am I racist? I just said I want the best for like my people, and they're like, no, you're internalized racism. You don't get it.
Oh, when you're a race traitor, God, getting called. I love getting called a race traitor.
I get that all the time because Hispanic communities are the same, and it's funny because it's like I grew up super Hispanic. Like I missed one of the running jokes is I missed.
I'm
like
always getting Joe to watch 80s action movies
because I missed all that.
Yeah.
I watched all of them and dubbed in Spanish on Telemundo and Univision. You know, like I grew up on. It's a totally different culture. So my like media, like what do you call it? Like the whatever the media that I watch is like Saulo Gigante on Saturdays, you know, like I don't know. But anyway, going back to my point is that I grew up in front of a TV where I didn't think anything of it. Our media, our news is so biased in Spanish media, super biased, super left leaning. And you kind of like, even if you come in with a conservative, you know, my parents are both immigrants. They both are closet or like they're confused because they really are conservatives, but they really aren't when they come and vote because they're being told every day when they sit down to watch the news, this is good, this is bad, because their news is biased. And then I leave the house or I go into the workforce and then I'm like, man, taxes suck. And then I start like coming up with my own ideas because I'm out there living and I have this, you know, revolution of thought. And then I come back and I tell my parents and they're like, you're voting for all those racist people. And I'm like, what? You're anti-Hispanic.
I remember one time.
I'm so confused by this.
We went on a trip. We went on a trip to this big training event that happens every year in Missouri called NOC Train and Learn event run by one of our mentors in the gun community. And I remember Joe's like, oh, I'm going with Rolo. We're going to go to like Orlando for a week or whatever. Because her mom was like, I hope you're not out there getting trained to be a domestic terrorist or anything like this. And we're literally out there shooting AR-15s. I was like, she would totally think that we are. I was like, but half the people here are black. I was like, and we have all these different, like, it was the most diverse, like, group. And not intentionally. It's just like, we're all here and everybody's welcome. And that's how it worked out. And it's like, there's just so many different parallels going on here. And it was just so funny to hear that. And meanwhile, my parents are the opposite. My dad was in the Navy. I grew up a Navy brat, but never with any guns in the household just because you move overseas, you can't take your guns with you. And born in Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico used to have extremely strict gun laws, despite being part of the United States up until recently. So, you know, I bought my first gun when I was 21 and I could buy a handgun. And then slowly my parents have loved what we've done on YouTube and with gun rights advocacy. So my dad bought his first gun about a year ago and I've taken him out and taught him how to shoot.
That's awesome.
With that. So it's been really awesome. So it sucks having kind of the contrast between like Joe's family, who's very like vehemently against it, and my family that's totally like, I've radicalized my father. That's where I'm at. So my dad, who was in the military for 25 years now, like the government is the root of all evil. The Pentagon is busting out with all this woke, and he's still, you know, in that space. So it's now funny. I was like, you got to be careful, Dad. They're gonna fire you one day. He's like, I don't give.
Nice.
Like, this is all crap.
Well, that's very interesting that you both have very different, you know, backgrounds here. So, you know, your father, Rolo, like he heard perspectives that were outside of the mainstream norm. Joe, would you say that your parents do they kind of, because you mentioned like TV and some of that, do they like watch a lot of like American TV, American media, or? Well,
they watch it on like filtered through. They only watch 2 channels. They only watch Spanish TV, Telemundo and Univision. That's it. And it's really like, I didn't realize it while I was growing up that there was a filter where we're all getting this information translated in a certain specific place. Like it's all extremely biased. And I didn't realize it until I came back into that household. I sat down on the couch and I went, wow, I cannot believe this is not news. This is propaganda.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of. Go ahead. Just.
there's people over here that I talk to where I'll like say something and about no, that can't be right, that can't be right, because this now all media over here is regulated by Ofcom, which literally tells them like the boundaries of what is acceptable to say, and so there is only one perspective. And like I talk to them and I'll say, "Well, no, you can't say that because this said this thing." I'm like, oh, "Okay," and then it's like they're on a delay of reality, because in 6 months they'll come back and go, "Oh, you were right about this thing you said over there," and I'm like, "Yeah." How often do I have to be correct before you just start trusting me and maybe look into it yourself? It's like, no, it's so weird when you live with people that only consume from one place, and it is literally like they're lagging behind in time, because you have to wait for things to catch up to what's allowed by Ofcom to say before they even like understand that it's possible.
So, one of my favorite things to do, and it helps wake some people up, is talking about history and the parallels that you see between that. So I've talked about like different societies that have gone through social turmoil. Obviously, we had the American Civil War, but that feels detached because it was, 150 years ago, almost 200 now. So you have that detachment. But if you talk about more modern conflicts like the Spanish Civil War, it's like, well, Spain had a civil war. I was like, yeah, this is why it happened. These were the forces that kind of pushed that. Even in Great Britain with the troubles of Northern Ireland, I was like, you have social strife and it's political, and you find out the narratives of like even how the UK government escalated that stuff and covered a lot of other things up. And as you learn those things, you start like
your media will also have had that through a filter. So
of course, well, no, I actually watched the BBC's own documentary on the troubles. It was interesting. Yeah, well, they were going to filter it. But... but I've watched different things like that, and you see those parallels, and you see like how a society can be pushed one way or the other, and that a lot of times the forces are governmental forces that are influencing a lot of those things throughout the way. And you're always kind of called a conspiracy theorist if you start seeing like, what, this happened in this country, or this happened actually here 50 years ago. It was pretty much the same strategy that's being used now. But obviously back then you had like 3 news channels, so the narrative was very easy to cover up. So it's kind of ironic that we live in an era now where we have more information, but they try to cover up more than ever before. And it's almost like they've got sand in their hands and it keeps leaking out. And they can't stop the flow. So eventually it's going to break. And I think that's where we're reaching the point where people don't trust institutions anymore. And you have the people that are so ingrained and so reliant on it, either because they hold the power, or the people that have bought into it, like their existence, they can't imagine an existence without this authority and people telling them what to think. So it would be, I think, Yeonmi Park, she escaped from North Korea and she made it to the West. And one of the things that she said was when she went to South Korea and they kind of like unindoctrinated her and taught her about like Western civilization, she left and she was terrified because she's like, you mean I actually have to do everything myself now and I'm reliant on myself? And they're like, yeah, that's what freedom is all about. And she's like, she saw at first like she didn't want that. She's like, no, I don't want this. This is too difficult, or this is uncomfortable. And it's just crazy how you just have to pull people out of that. And it takes a lot of effort.